Testing, testing, testing. Yes.
Check. Works.
Testing. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All
Working,
right.
working.
All right.
Duck GPT, Sam GPT, Barrybot, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I don't know. Are we all robots today?
I don't know. I'm in the weeds today.
Oh, in the weeds or the grass.
Yeah, I actually don't know what that's supposed to be. I can't tell the scale that it's intended to be. It looks like grass, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Macro. Look who's back after a couple of weeks of being off on holiday and camping or whatever. Workshops.
Workshop, the first one, and the second weekend was with the family, with the grandson, 4-year-old grandson. Yeah.
Cool.
It's not like it's vacation season or anything.
It is. Everybody's vacating.
We get double Sam here.
Yeah, we have 3 Sams today.
I have some questions for you guys today, but we'll see whether or not you guys have other things to bring up.
There's always many things to bring out. So the question is, who put it up first?
My only request is we not talk about HP Sprout today.
Okay.
Oh,
Oh,
that
man.
computer.
That's why I come here. That's the reason I come here, Sam.
All right. I'm going off to start a different conversation then, okay?
Go for it.
Or at least Sprout the health food store. Maybe we could talk about that one.
Let's see here. Okay. I have a question for you guys.
Query away.
Can AI today or soon be taught scientific reasoning, critical thinking, model-based reasoning, evidence evaluation, suspension of disbelief, generous listening, epistemology, and provenance? Can AI either today or soon attain these skills? And I have follow-up questions to this.
Short answer is
Well, asking that question, actually it's on my mind. I'm supposed to give a talk in September for my Conscious Leadership Guild group, and my thinking was thinking about how could the conscious leadership of influence AI's development. So it's the same line of what you just talked about. Unless we get influence in, it's like walking the dog. And if either you walk the dog or the dog walking you, it's like one way or the other. If you run the business or business running you, AI is the same thing. It's a tool. Unless we have influence on them, they're going to have influence on me. As simple as that. So it's a good topic. Thank you, Sam. So go ahead.
So let me push you a little bit more. Is that a yes or a no?
Yes. The question is this, okay? The question is yes, is that when there's a compelling reason and there's a value you can create out, somebody found a way to do this in the way that it will create value for the person doing it, because unless there's value, you won't last very long. It's like you're driving. Unless there's a gas station between you and the destination, you won't be able to refuel. You won't have money to pay for it. You won't last very long. As much as you have, as much as good intention, unless you have value creation that create money for you and you can pay people for it. Look at how much money Microsoft invests in, ChatGPT. Otherwise, it won't go this far.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, I would say
You're frozen again, Josh.
movie Bicentennial Man with Rob. It's the 200-year
You just
pathway.
dropped out for several
Am I back?
key seconds. Okay, now
I'm
you're
sure
back.
that's the story of my life. If I'm back, check out the movie Bicentennial Man.
That was like
Robin
30 years
Williams.
ago, right? Yeah.
It's the exact question you asked, and it's a 200-year journey of a regular, stupid chat GPT going to becoming a real person with emotions. And
Yes, and I remember what the movie said. Now I'm curious, now informed by current events, do we think that, or do we think that differently now?
I think we have evidence to support that.
I think it's even faster than 200 years. I think in that movie came out in the 90s, it would take 200 years from that trajectory. But from this trajectory, I would say maybe 120. in terms of years.
I would
That would
say
be my guess.
single
guesstimate.
digits.
Well, single digits for emotions, but I'm saying 120 years to do the trajectory of the movie arc, where he gets a actual synthetic heart and skin, etc., and so forth. But
Okay, so we have a yes from Sam. We have what? Is that a yes? Does it sound like
That's
a yes
a-
from Josh? Okay. All right.
well, it's just
Barrister.
what's your time? But wait, slow down. What's your time frame? You never said.
I
You
said
said,
either
will we-
today or soon, and I'll let you define soon. I use the word soon.
I define 120 years as soon. So yes.
I hate to
Okay.
tell you this. I hate to tell you, Josh, is that whoever tried to predict the time, they're hallucinating, because as far as even the CEO of Microsoft that invests billions of dollars into ChatGPT can't even predict that what the capability of ChatGPT is. How could you have the brain and the resources to accurately predict any time frame? So as far as I'm concerned, it could happen any day now, really. Depends on really, perspective.
Well,
It's scary.
I think I'm extracting out the amount of data that it would take to go through the type of nerve endings that a human body has to go through, the type of neurological connections of say, a Dojo supercomputer connected to quite a bit of data that it's going to need in order to interpret the emotions correctly. And I think if the question that I'm hearing you ask, Sam, Han, correctly is, will it have the emotions that a human being has? That's what I heard you ask. You didn't say that.
I did not ask that. No, I did not ask that.
So you didn't ask what level of emotional capability. Is it the emotions of a 2-year-old? Is it the emotions of a 100-year-old? Or what emotional intelligence EQ? Yeah.
I didn't address emotion at all. I didn't use that word.
For me, the emotion is about fine-tuning. It's sort of
What word did you use instead of saying what you didn't use? What word did you use so I can hear your question correctly?
I used the words scientific reasoning, critical thinking, model-based reasoning, data and evidence evaluation, suspension of disbelief, generous listening, and epistemology and provenance.
Could you?
Okay, I didn't hear you say any of that.
Because I can't remember that list
It's in the
Okay,
transcript.
let me,
reliably.
If you click on the transcript, it's in there.
yes.
Or is it already in there?
If you click on the transcript,
A transcript. Yeah.
Yeah.
let me see,
the
guys.
full, if you see the full transcript, it will tells you there.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah. So a couple of things, if I may jump in here real quick. One is that I want to say two main points. One is that AI is, as far as I can tell, is what I call the super fast supersonic parrot. It comb all the data, you know how to speak, you know how to repeat the words, you know how to recognize a pattern. It's a smart supersonic fast parrot. It only can as smart as whatever data that the human being feed them. Okay, so that's one thing. The second thing is about emotion and all the critical thinking. You got to read between the lines. You got to comb in higher resolution of the listening, reading, combing, whatever you call that. You have to go deeper in order to extract that what you're talking about, all the variables or parameters you talk about. It's already there. The question is somebody have the resources to go to 10 level deep instead of large data model? This will be the deeper large data model, if I can use those words. And that's investment of, I would say, tenfold of what currently have in order to get to that level of details and that level of scientifically data and all that deeper level discussion. So it's sort of like, I listen to you. If I get to watch you, I get one more channel of data. When I listen to you, I really pay attention and suppress my own judgment. I got another level of, detail. So so on and so forth. So it's like, that's how listening is. It's about read between the lines and look at the environment, the content. And the more data I have to compare with, to work with, I get more data for the extraction. I'm complete.
Okay, thank you, Sam. And Barry, may we hear from you on this question?
Yeah, I think that the evidence for all of those and more has already been demonstrated in spades over the last 6 months. And I'll give you one that you may not have heard of.
So is that a yes?
Absolutely. One that I just read a headline on a day or two ago. There is a classical standard test for creative writing. I forget the name of it, but it's an objective test that's been around for decades. And somebody gave a creative writing prompt to college students and to, I think it was ChatGPT, but one of them, and provided an anonymous collection of all of these efforts at creative writing to this examination organization that scores it on the standard test of creative writing. And the AI scored between the 97th and 99th percentile on all the categories. It beat humans, including college-educated people in the liberal arts, who are learning to write poetry and other creative writing. And so in terms of suspension of disbelief, that is writing something that's just synthetic, not factual, they're already, 97 and 99th percentile. The other thing that I began doing as soon as Sam Chan gave me access to ChatGPT 4, and I was already doing it with ChatGPT 3.5, is doing something that's called prompt engineering, or better yet, AI whispering. In AI whispering, you basically educate somebody in the classical maieutic method of Socrates. You don't give them the information, but step by step, you ask them carefully crafted questions so they construct the knowledge from scratch. This is the constructivist model. And I did a number of exercises on constructivist learning, among others, including my own model of emotions and learning. And I got ChatGPT 4 to construct what took me 30 years to construct, autodidactically, by asking it questions. ChatGPT 4 constructed essentially the entire theory of emotions learning in about 20 minutes. And all that stuff, that and several others of that AI whispering, prompt engineering, I posted some of it on Facebook chats, some of it on my Molten Lava blog, some of it on my medium.com blog. So I posted it in a number of places, and it was a correspondent of mine who said, "Barry, do you realize that you're doing AI whispering?" Because I wasn't using that term until somebody said that's what I was doing. So I've shared that, and I've seen other people, especially this Australian chap, can I remember his name now? The one who's been doing it with ChatGPT 3 for about 3 or 4 years now. He had also been doing kind of this prompt engineering stuff with an earlier version. Lita was the name of the bot, Leta. So there's lots and lots of evidence of model-based reasoning, classical ones involving things involving gravity, for example. If you let go of a helium balloon, will it fall to the ground like an apple? Will it rise? How far will it rise? When will it stop rising? What happens when it? So there are examples, a number of examples where people have given it problems to solve, where it was very creative in problem solving, and the physics was correct, and there was no existing example in the reading literature for that particular set of problems that they were given. So my answer is, the evidence has been extant for more than 6 months with the current edition, and back 3 years, all the way back to the earlier versions of GPT-3, for example.
Okay. Thank you. May I ask the follow-up question? Stop me anytime. Okay. All right, here's the follow-up question. If we suspend disbelief, can we, in a certain extreme interpretation, can we view humans as merely GPTs?
There's some evidence that we use similar forms of pattern recognition and pattern generation. If you think of pattern thinking as one of the faculties of human neural networks, and pattern recognition and pattern generation is what these GPTs are doing, there's very good evidence that the smartest people, like the people in Silicon Valley, are very, very good at pattern thinking. And
So is
pattern
that a
thinking,
yes?
yeah, pattern thinking is both mathematical. There was a course at Stanford in which pattern recognition was the name of the course. And I took that course in grad school at Stanford. Tom Culver, the late Tom Culver, taught that course. And it's basically applied mathematics. And most
So
people
that's a yes, Barry?
yeah, most people do
That's a yes.
do these kinds of reasoning intuitively, as opposed to with, straightforward calculus, calculated computing autocorrelations. You do pattern recognition mathematically with autocorrelations. Most people wouldn't even know how to pronounce it, let alone define autocorrelations, but you can do it intuitively, and that's how pattern recognition works. In fact, the classical example of primitive pattern recognition is recognizing rhymes. And the first two rhymes that a child learns are ma, ma, and pa, pa, or da, da. And those rhymes are very short repeating sequences. And as you gradually get to longer and longer repeating sequences, they get more and more sophisticated. But you begin with single syllable rhymes, mama and da da. And mama is the oldest word in every single language. It's the one word that's in every language, and it's the first word ever identified as a spoken word, mama, followed by da da.
Okay, so Josh, Sam, do you remember the
I'd
question?
like you to ask the same question again one more time so I can hear you.
Okay, so the question is, so suppressing the preamble, can we look at humans and view humans as GPTs?
No. We have terrible memories.
Well, so does the GPT.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh.
It has a window of how many tokens, 2,000 tokens or 8,000 tokens. Or
We have 3 tokens. We have 3 tokens.
Actually, 7.
7. Okay, fine.
Telephone numbers were up to 7 digits. And they found, and this is at Bell Labs, they found that if you recite a telephone number, 7 digits is about the maximum that people can reliably remember. Without
That's
writing.
part of an
thing
IQ
is,
test, by the way.
The 7 is that you have to chunk into 2 chunks, the 3 and the 4 groups. If you try to have 7 in the one straight number, you lose them. Trust me.
Yeah.
Well, that's why they chunk. That's why it's chunk.
Well, that's one reason. It's also
That's why I say it's 3. 3 is more accurate. The 7 is you have to chunk it down. That doesn't count as a 7.
it also has to do with a little bit with the technology of how the numbers are decoded in the central office. So a single central office can decode 10,000.
Okay, now that's too much detail, Barry.
Okay.
Yeah,
but that's
one of
part
the-
reason.
One of the TED Talk coming from, I forgot what's his name now. Anyway, he was my classmate in the mastermind that I joined with the different groups. That he's a co-founder of Siri, right? So the basically the thing is, anyway, the important thing is this, okay? Human being is like us, we can only walk so fast, but with the car we can drive a lot faster. So in the ChatGPT's perspective, we can think a lot, we can hallucinate, and then we can use the memory that the iPhone has that help us to remember things. So and we work together to do pattern recognition. I wouldn't say that I'm an expert on pattern recognition, but I see a lot of pattern in multiple fields and multiple perspectives, so I can see things that most people don't see because of my cultures and my trainings and my whatever you want to call that. And I was one time, okay, let's put it this way. I finished my high school, my middle school, and my high school, actually. I was going to go to the college level, right? So I went to a test, they call it Polytechnic. I'm not sure you know what Polytechnic or not. It's all like city college in Malaysia, right? So I went through the test and they go through the entrance test. By the 3rd test, they kicked me out. And I say, what the hell, why you kick me out? It's like, well, because you're too smart for us. I say, what's wrong with that? He said, well, because you're going to go to college and we don't want someone that come to vacational school and then go to college and you wasted our resources here. So, and all the whole test is all recognition. It's all pattern recognition. And basically they give you 200 math tests. You're supposed to finish in 15 minutes. And most people finish like maybe 1/10 of it or whatever. I finish up the whole thing or whatever, something along the line. So pattern recognition is complicated. You have to do meta thinking. You have to look at it multiple perspectives. You look at it from whatever works for you, unless you can recognize it. So think of this way: you can write a 200 words article that has 7 languages built into it. Unless you know all 7 languages, you won't understand the whole article. But if you do understand all 7 languages, that's a piece of cake for you. And pattern recognition is similar to that. I'm complete.
Thanks, Sam. Josh, you want to answer that question? No is perfectly fine.
No, go ahead. We can move
Okay.
forward.
I have a follow-up question then. May I ask my next follow-up question?
Sure.
Thanks for the
sure.
prompt engineering for the human.
Okay, here's the next question. Will AI or AGI be able to design itself as a DNA-based organism?
Yes.
You're gonna have to define
So I'll
what
get a
you mean
yes.
by DNA based in that context.
In other words, have a biological manifestation with the capabilities of an AGI. In other words, this is the confluence of natural evolution of humans that then merges with AGIs and SGIs and GGIs.
I'm not sure if I understand.
The way I
in
think
other
about it,
words,
if I may,
explain to me
Jamin,
that.
the way I think about this is basically it's a simulation. How sophisticated can a simulation get? Can you simulate a human being? I say yes, because again, we go back to the first question you asked about, how deep can you go? Like if you can go deeper and large language model, you have all the enough data to do the simulation. Once you make simulation, like I was using PL1 to simulate PDP-11, PDP-8, back in my college days. So heck, to simulate the human being, piece of cake, because you got billions of people to simulate from. You have enough data, patterns, whatever else you need out of it to simulate to enough parameters, data to construct the simulation.
Let me give you the angle from which I'm asking the question. In other words, can we imagine that at some point in time, and I'm not going to predict when, that an AGI will be able to essentially merge with humans or squids or octopus, whatever, chooses as the first biological starting point, and begin the process of reproduction. And in that sense, reproduce as kind of this cyber organism, this hybrid organism that has both biological as well as these, what do we call it, AGI capabilities. That's the angle from which I'm asking.
I understand. I fully understand exactly what you're talking about. So the key from my perspective is, again, it's about, do you have enough data to do the construct, the simulation? That's one perspective. The other perspective is do you have people to have the resources, have the money, to have the talent, and have to focus on this particular subject? So another way of saying is that if you want to design a bicycle that can reverse as you turn the wheel, you turn to the right, you go to the left, that kind of bicycle, when you have the compelling reason to design one, you have the money to design one, and you know how to do it, of course it can be constructed. The question is, if you're missing one of the 3 key, whatever you want to construct the structure, then you won't be able to make it. So I really believe it or not, someone that's already on this.
Yeah.
I
Tools
do
for
also.
thought are just a fancy version of tools for hand.
Yeah.
For thousands, maybe millions of years, we've had tools for hand, a stick.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
And gradually our tools became more and more sophisticated. Now our tools, can have radios and televisions and telephones and airplanes. We can have tools that allow us to do all kinds of things that the plain human body can't do. We have the steam shovel and the leaf blower, and there's no reason why, when you wear a watch on your wrist, why couldn't the watch be imprinted on as a circuit board right on your skin? It could be, we haven't bothered, but instead of a pair of glasses, you got contact lenses and lenses implanted, you know, you got cochlear implants so you can hear, and you could make your cochlear implant be able to hear hypersonic or subsonic sounds if you wanted to. So sure, you can integrate a calculator chip here so that you don't actually have to have a little calculator that you punch buttons on, or you could talk to it. Yeah, why not? I mean, it's just sure.
So I'm talking a little bit beyond that, not much, but it's where we actually have a joint capability, joint meaning human plus AGI, that can then utilize CRISPR, the next generation, to actually design the DNA sequence to make your ears that much better, or your eyes that much better, or your muscles that much better, or give you an extra knuckle in your hands, you know, etc., or give you webbing between your toes and fingers. You know, that's what I'm actually wondering. And if you understand those extensions, then it's like taking the brain and how it works and how it evolves, and as you grow, and having it then attain these superhuman thinking, quote unquote, capabilities. Over.
Yeah, Hugh Hare at the Media Lab has artificial limbs, legs mainly, but also you can do with arms that are smart. So he lost his legs in a rock climbing accident. He got basically caught in very cold conditions while rock climbing, and he lost his legs below the knee. And then he developed high-tech prosthetic legs that are very smart. They can get the signals from the brain that would normally go to the muscles, and these artificial legs will respond to those and give you the same motion. In fact, he's got these exoskeleton legs that give you the power, the physical energy that a normal human wouldn't have. And this has been around for like 20, 30 years, being developed in the Media Lab. And some of it's
especially in Japan also.
some of it's internal in a synthetic limb. And sure, why not?
Thanks, Barry.
Anyone
I love
else?
your background, of your new Zoom background.
Yeah. I mean, I met Hugh Hare. He was at the Media Lab. His laboratory was right next door to Ross Picard's laboratory with affective computing, and the affective computing can look at the expression on your face and your demeanor and intuit what affective state you're presenting. It can't figure out necessarily what you're hiding, but it can see what you're projecting.
Anyone else?
I'm going to jump in if I may. So, like what Barry just said, see, if you look at the whole big picture, meta perspective, he has a compelling reason because he lost his leg. Criteria number one, super important with 3 stars on it, 5 stars on it, whatever you want to put. I usually put 3 asterisks on it. Super important, compelling reason. He has a resources, he has a money, he has a talent to do it. Of course, it get done. What else you need? So right now, you can use your stem cell to create the teeth. You can grow teeth. Yeah, actually, I'm sure you know about that. You know, so again, when there's a compelling reason for whatever needs is, if Bill Gates lost his leg, I'm sure there'll be a artificial intelligent leg that can walk itself. You know, compelling reason, resources, and the talent or technology, whatever you call that. That's it.
There's another guy at the Media Lab who was working on spinal cord injury, where your spinal cord has a gap in it because of an injury. And he developed a system where he can create a matrix, synthetic matrix, which will then cause the nerves to grow and reconnect. And that was done, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, reconnecting nerves that got broken, especially in spinal cord. And so you can reconnect a broken, it's like splicing a telephone wire. You basically can get the nerves to splice themselves back together by creating a little substructure bridge that allows them to grow across the gap.
Anybody else? Can I ask a follow-up question then?
Go ahead.
Yes.
If we imagine this scenario where we could actually then fuse or merge these forms of intelligence and evolution, what is the likelihood that AGIs will choose humans to start from versus a different starting point?
I think it's low because of ethics. I think they'll start with mice or insects, but probably mice. I mean, we've been doing studies with mice learning mazes and things like that. And we have lots of strains of laboratory mice. But I can see either insects or mice as the before you do humans, and then maybe chimpanzees or some other mammals higher, going up the chain. There's the problem with humans is there's an ethics issue that you've got to get past, which is political issue, not a scientific issue.
Political issue, social, ethical issue, whatever it is. Remember, the people with the most amount of money worry about getting sued. The mice will not sue them. The monkey will not sue them, but human being will. So, yeah, just like Obama say, I cannot take any risk. So the richer you are, the less brave, should I say, unless you have a compelling reason to do it beyond, a normal human way of measuring ethics and all that.
Remember that, first they wouldn't let you take a calculator into your classroom because you had to do the math by hand. And then they wouldn't let you take computers in, and then you have open book exams. So eventually they're saying, learn to use the tools that take the drudgery out of it, because the drudgery is just slow and tedious and error prone. And yes, you can learn to do long division. What's the point? Why spend time doing long division tediously and erratically when you can get a machine to do it rapidly and reliably so you can work on the higher level? What's the formula? What's the mathematics that you want where you have to do some long division to get the correct answer? So learn to use the tools.
Yeah, as long as you know how to do manual hand division, then I don't think you should be made to do it. But not having that skill is
You need to know what it is. You need to know what it means.
No. You also need to know how to do it.
Well,
In
maybe.
my opinion.
I mean,
Anyway, so my answer to this question, actually, Sam, do you want to go first,
About what?
or Josh?
Give
What
me the
would be
question
the
again.
starting point? What is the starting point? What would AGI select as a starting point on the, let's say, protoplasmic side?
AGI itself is pretty complicated already. So from my perspective, AGI tried to be as close as to human being thinking, the way they think. So there's enough data already that is out there that every single words, every single articles, every single construction of the technology has all that information embedded in it already. So it's about extracting data. Now you don't need to go to human being and tap into the brain to extract anything at all. No, you don't need it. I mean, every single piece, like even this iPhone that's been constructed, it has all kinds of what people need and people don't think they need yet and already be built. And so that has, again, if you read between the lines and watch people's facial expression, you can extract every information you need from it already. AGI has the information already. It doesn't need to, and I've been put this way, if all the people die in the whole world, AGI can survive itself with the data it's already contained, collected so far.
Yeah, as long as they can reproduce, which it will soon.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to figure out, in what form it would choose to reproduce, and would it choose this hybrid form, because there's a lot of downsides to protoplasm.
Again, if I go back to what my 3 points is, okay, if you have a compelling reason to have that, and you have the money to do that, you have the technology to do that, it's done. It's a matter
That's
of time.
exactly my next follow-up question. Would AGI consider it of any value for humans to survive and to actually do this merging?
Of course it does. We need all the help we can get. We're killing each other. We have a country that's 100 times bigger than the smaller country. They try to attack the smaller country. I mean, there are so many conflicts out there that with AGI will increase their intelligence, allow them to have better critical thinking process. There's no reason to have any damn war at all. I mean, it's making me sick.
Josh, you had your hand up.
I'm just curious, when you ask if AGI would have a value or be programmed with values or even have a logic that uses values. I don't know that it would, especially
I
if
think
it
it would
was
derive them.
Yeah, I think it would program it out of the system and find it to be annoying to have to use values in order to create. So if it was built with
I don't-
values, it
yeah.
would.
One
Yeah,
value
I don't
is
think we need to
program
build
it
it
up.
with values. It would itself derive what to optimize, in my opinion.
it's a value to be able to do your work efficiently and reliably, and without taking, so damn long that you never get it done. So, these remote probes, these outer space probes and Mars probes and the deep sea probes, they're designed to be as high functioning as they can be, and they will take measures to protect themselves from abnormal conditions. They'll go into a sleep mode if there's not enough sunlight energy or whatever it is to do their job, so that they can survive and over the long term optimize their total utility. This one that's Voyager probe is in a sleep mode right now because it drifted away from aiming its radio signal at the Earth. And I think next October is the next time that it's going to make an attempt to realign its radio. So right now it's drifting out of touch, but it has a plan periodically to readjust, because that takes energy. And you wait until it's an optimal time where you can find some star in the sky to Canopus, to orient on, and all this, have a high probability of success of recalculating how to spend your energy re-aiming your attitude. These things all basically have values of survival and productivity and efficiency.
That's very good. Thank you, Barry. So to my perspective, value have multiple perspective. If I'm funding the damn thing, I bet it had better value come back to me. Okay, that's one value. The other value is I have some hidden agenda that I'm not telling one, that is, I'm trying to impress my girlfriend, for example, that they better have value that impress my girlfriend, for example. And then that's value, like what Barry was just saying, self-survival. There are multiple perspectives. As long as those value that whoever is funding it, see it and value it, we're good to go.
Look at the Mars helicopter. Gradually, at first it just went a little bit. It's like a kid learning to stand up and walk. Every time it was trying to go just a shade more than the last time, until it could reliably adapt and optimize its behavior so that it could fly long distances, higher altitudes, and get better pictures. But not all in one step. It was just very carefully stepwise. Evaluate the last cycle and figure out what can you tweak, to get just a skosh more performance out of less energy, because you only get so much sunlight a day and so things like that.
You can call that you're looking for the micro feedback, the tiniest feedback you can get that was useful for you, that you won't kill yourself.
Right. And don't make too big a step at once, because you want to take carefully, you don't want too small a step and not too big a step. What's the optimum step size to make sure that you still survive?
Yes, right.
And learn something.
That's right.
Trading off survival versus learning as much as you can.
Yeah, there's two parameters, survival, and it says you have enough information, you can learn from it. So there's two criteria, you're balancing it.
It's like any athlete, you don't want to land on your head because you tried too complicated of a triple, whatever they're called, triple somersaults, but you work them up, according to some optimal calculus and optimal practice.
Anything that's really important, for example, in the political interface, negotiation,
Same thing, yeah.
hostage situation, and husband and wife are about to go into divorce, whatever that is, micro feedback is balancing survival versus what can I learn from it.
And how innovative can I be? When can I introduce a new maneuver that's never been seen before? The Fosbury flop, going over the jump backwards. I mean, the idea might have been around for a long time before Fosbury worked out that he could figure out how to do it and actually pull it off in competition.
And when you graduate from all that,
those triple sow cow or whatever those fancy jumps are called, you know, that finally some performer figures out how to do it reliably, does it in competition, and knocks their socks off.
Yeah. And if you're really good at this kind of thing, you become a master mechanics.
Yeah, exactly. Which I'm not.
Yeah.
So for me, this line of questioning was because I've just been, in a sense, a little bit depressed by a lot of the pundits out there that are declaring these disaster scenarios due to AI and AI acting out of control. So I was asking myself these questions, and I actually believe that the answer for me is in that first question. If AGI, can actually learn to think scientifically, evidence-based, model-based, with suspension of disbelief, I'm actually quite optimistic. And so this next question is something you can feel free to completely throw me out here for asking. But I then asked the following Gedanken experiment question. If we have people who believe in science and believe in data and believe in reasoning, training these GPTs, AGIs, etc., call that scenario 1. Scenario 2, we have people who believe in religion, the Bible, God, training these GPTs. How would these GPTs, these outcomes, behave differently? Over.
I think they would learn to write poetry, use metaphors.
Which one? 1 or 2?
1 or 2 what?
In other words, scenario 1 is the kind of GPTs that we're seeing out in the wild. Scenario 2, maybe it's already out there, are the ones that are, basically trained on the Bible, trained on religious thought, trained on God teachings. How would they behave differently?
I think the ones that have access to literature will be much better at learning to craft good stories that educate, even if the story is pure fiction. Fiction is a great scam.
So is that 1 or 2?
Tell the truth while pretending to lie. And it turns out that if you're educating humans will react to stories more than they'll react to mathematical theories. You can know the math like your dad, and you can present the math, equals MC squared and so on, and nobody will have a clue what you're talking about. Or you can write an allegory or a parable or a fairy tale or a fable that at least a few percent of the story reading public will see the deep content, even though it's enrobed in a made-up story. And the genius of those who founded the religions were to come up with stories that made incremental progress in people seeing deep ideas and overthrowing the wrong ideas. And I give them a lot of credit. I give Aesop a lot of credit for figuring out how to teach morality by making up stories involving animals. And the people who made up really good stories got a lot farther in educating our species than those who just gave us the straight math, the straight technology. When I try to teach people straight technology, I fall flat on my face. They don't get a damn thing. I got to come up with some metaphor, some analogy, some poetry, some story that somehow acts like a Trojan horse and gets the idea into their head, even though the story itself is totally synthetic. Go ahead, Sam.
Okay, so this is going to be an extreme example, but I can imagine writing a simple story that says, hey, if I'm walking down the street and I see someone on the side of the street and they're clearly, impoverished, not healthy, probably a little bit, tired, etc. And I give them $5, then I will never be able to be free of them because they would keep following me and they're going to ask me for $5 every hour, every day. So moral of the story is don't give them any money. I can see an example of a story like that. That's easy to understand, easy to write, teaches a lesson, and could be spread to the billions, and billions would understand it. Okay. So I ask you, is the power really in the simplicity of the story? And do we really want story to be the means and the only means or the primary means by which we teach behavior?
Here's what
And the
works.
reason I'm doing this is I would say that there's many ways to construct a critical model where that's not the conclusion. But yet, if you want to reduce it to a simple story, that's a very simple story. So end of example.
On Thursday at the Toastmasters meeting, the topic of the day was reading books. And one of the questions was, tell us your favorite author. And two of us said, we don't like to read fiction because fiction is a lie. We like to read nonfiction. And I pointed out, and when I said something similar, I said, except that fiction is a great scam. Literary fiction is a great scam because you get to tell the truth while pretending to lie. And the problem is that if you're a prophet and you tell the lie, you're going to get strung up. Prophets don't do well in the general public wants to lynch prophets, people who predict the truth, and the people don't want to hear the truth. So what do? They water down the prophecy into fairy tales, and then they don't get killed. And somebody in the next generation finally figures out the hidden story in the prophecy. J.K. Rowling wrote fiction that's full of truth, and she reached a lot of audience. Go ahead, Sam.
Okay, I'm trying to connect what you said back to my question. Okay, so one way of doing it is asking, the story that I told has a moral of the story that says, yeah, if you ignore the beggar on the side of the road, you'll keep your money. You won't lose that $5. You won't lose the $5 every day or every week or every hour. That's one possible moral of the story that serves the audience that it's reaching. The audience feels better about itself. The audience feels, oh yeah, that's a good moral lesson, and I'm going to just behave according to this story, and it's going to start sharing the story with their kids, their grandkids, and that's how society is going to evolve. So it is in the self-interest of the audience to follow the moral of that story.
Have you ever watched somebody sit on the side of the road and starve and die right in front of you, just sitting there and wasting away and dying over 3 months?
Is that the point, though?
Yes, the point is you wouldn't want to. The consequence of not feeding that beggar is that he's going to.
But that's not in the story, Barry. That's not in the story.
That's why somebody made a better story. Give a man a fish, he'll have a meal for a day. Teach a man to fish, and he can find food for the rest of his life. So the better story is the one that enables and empowers the beggar to not have to beg, and therefore not sit there and die of starvation on the side of the road and become a corpse, which is going to not make people sick because they're going to regret later that they let him die.
Yeah, but do people look for better stories?
Some people do, because some people made up the better story. Teach a man to fish.
Most people, I would suggest, don't. In other words, if I looked at the story of Hansel and Gretel, did I go around saying, I want a better version of this story? No, I didn't do that.
Disney did. Disney took a lot of the gore out of
Barry. Yeah, Hans Christian Andersen and those guys and Brother Grimes, they had really, really grisly stories. I understand that. They made them palatable to kids so that they would have better reach. But these kids that heard these stories aren't asking themselves, hey, is there a better version of this story? They're not.
Not as kids, but as adults, they're going to tell the same story, but they're going to improve the story. When I learned a story as a child, and then as an adult, I want to use that same story, I'm probably going to improve it, or at least to my mind, make a better version of it.
You think that's standard practice?
No, because I think I'm a very, very atypical person.
Okay.
You and I and a few people who went to college are very, very unusual.
I'm not talking to you. I'm actually talking to someone else. Okay.
Well, then go talk to them.
To the people who hear these fables and these fairy tales. They're not looking for better versions. They accept what they're told.
How do you know that?
because these stories haven't changed in decades,
Did you see?
hundreds of years.
Did you see the video? What's it called? I think it's called. Oh, I'll have to find it. There's a very short video that won a prize. It was only about 5 minutes long, and it involved a therapy session with a bunch of characters, and they were all fairy tale characters. It was Alice in Wonderland and Dorothy, and they were all went to this therapy session, and they were all explaining what their psychological issue was that corresponds to what their story is about. And that particular one, along with Into the Woods by Stephen Sondheim, were modern recreations of these classical stories, fairy tales. And what they did is they elevated the content so that you begin to understand the psychology that undergirded these stories. The point was to reveal something about psychology and behavior. And I'll have to find the video for it because I can't remember the name of it now. But I always appreciated that somebody came along, like Neil Gaiman comes along, and he takes some classical theological literature and he reinvents it for a modern audience. And he's on Netflix and he gets tons of, there's a very popular series, and yet the content is the same story, but reimagined for the modern audience. And yes, Neil Gaiman is one of a kind. Okay, and the guy who did Buffy the Vampire Slayer, what's his name? He one of a kind, right? He takes these classical monster stories and he repurposes them for the 20th century audience. And yes, they're rare. They're rare people. The people who did it in the first place. Aesop was a very rare person. Hans Christian Andersen was a very rare person. Little by little, they're rewriting these Jungian archetype stories. Jung was a very rare person, but he thought these archetypes are very powerful ideas. The Handless Maiden and the Fisher King. Parsifal story.
So may I gently ask to connect it back to the question, which is how these different GPTs behave, scenario 1 versus scenario 2?
They would learn from the best history that historically succeeded, and evolve from that point. They wouldn't regress to something that's obsolescent and anachronistic and no longer works. They would take what's the last version that was really any good for that audience and then make it the next best version.
We're talking about this for both scenario 1 and scenario 2?
Yeah. So for example, the guy who says, I can tell you Newton's law of gravity, and I can tell you Einstein's improvement to it, and I can do it in the pure math. And he realizes that he's going to reach 0.1% of the population. And then somebody else will write a story about ballistics and the war and the cannonballs and all this kind of stuff and planet Mercury. And he'll tell a more story-like version, more narrative version of it, and he'll reach a bigger audience. And gradually people will figure out what's the current audience to explain these deep ideas to. So for example, Ivers Peterson, who is a fabulous science writer, wrote a book called Newton's Clock, Chaos in the Solar System. And it was about the fact that the orbital mechanics of the solar system is not a clock. For the longest time, and you can ask your father, mathematicians, all the way up to Hilbert, believed that under Newton's model of gravitational mechanics, the solar system was necessarily a periodic system, a clock, and it wasn't. And Poincaré and others figured out that it wasn't a clock and began to understand why it wasn't a clock. And Ivers Peterson wrote a fabulous book before the book of Chaos by James Gleick. There's a better one by Ivers Peterson, less well known, but a better one, because he went into the math of Lagrange and Poincaré and explained why is the solar system not a clock? Why is it not periodic? Disproved a theorem that Hilbert and others were trying desperately to prove 170 years ago. They were trying to prove the solar system is mathematically a clock, and they couldn't prove it. Finally, Poincaré says, the reason you can't prove it is because it ain't. And here's why it ain't. And
Well,
by the
Josh has
way,
had his hand up for a while.
Poincaré did that around 1900, and 25 years later, Einstein and Bohr didn't know about Poincaré's work. When Einstein says God doesn't throw dice, and Bohr says don't tell God what to do, neither of them knew that Poincaré had solved that mathematically 25 years earlier. It
Okay,
wasn't.
so I do have a
until-
follow-up, but Josh has had his hand up for a
Oh,
while.
go ahead, Josh. I'm
Thanks,
sorry.
Barry.
No, I think Barry's illustrating perfectly. Let me know if you can hear me. I'm on 2 bars of 5G cellular at the moment.
You're
Yeah,
solid.
Coming through good?
You're solid.
Okay. So I just keep thinking about Sam's story of the beggar with the $5. And the story is to create a model of behavior. And that model can be adopted quickly, a group of people that hear that story and create a protocol. And we spent I think about 40 minutes the other day asking ChatGPT what are protocols. And it came up with the idea of there can be perturbations in the protocol. So I think with any kind of modeling with storytelling, you can create a society that acts in that protocol, but there'll always be a forking off at some point, like Barry was saying, when they get older and can think for themselves, they might change that model or that protocol. But it is very effective in storytelling to create models for behavior, which is sometimes known as propaganda or rule of law and those sort of things, if the story is simplistic enough to be adopted. And I think that's what you're asking is, correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, maybe you can elaborate. What was your idea of illustrating that story in terms of correlation to this conversation of GPTs or
Okay.
protocols, etc.?
May I answer that question? Because Sam, you
Please.
may have something else to say, but I could answer that question.
Go ahead.
Okay, the point is this. If we spread simple stories that then spread a certain type of behavior, and if we don't look at the model that that story basically has embedded in it, okay, and look at what the implications are on society, then this behavior can have these side effects. These side effects can then spread. And then, you know, there are all of a sudden now these conditions which were not anticipated by the original authors of the story, okay? And those authors of the story were probably then, you know, many generations dead by then. And so what I'm suggesting is, yes, it's possible, it's quite effective to spread behavior via story, but that story needs to be well-founded. That story needs to be, in a sense, constantly revisited, as Barry is saying, by smart people, as Barry describes them, to say, can we improve on this? My argument is that doesn't happen very much, and it certainly seems not to happen in the case of religion. The story that we're told in religion has been established hundreds of years ago. Any suggestion that it is imperfect is met with hostility, possibly violence, okay? And there's many versions. There's that version over there, there's that version over there, you know, then there's ports of these different versions, and they all have this belief that their version is the right one, and they're ready to fight to protect it. So the way I'm asking this question is the following. In scenario 1, if you have a bunch of stories derived from, let's say, reasoning, science, model-based reasoning, whatever happens, if we're actually following the method of science and critical thinking, that evolution, to me, I understand how that makes sense, okay? I understand how stories can be improved, okay? On the other one, where everything's based on biblical teachings, you know, things that are written down hundreds of years ago and have a tremendous intolerance for change / improvement, okay? In that one, I'm suggesting that if we look at the behavior of society based on those stories and try and suggest improvement, number one, those improvements are going to be hard to facilitate because of the power structure behind them. And number two, they don't care necessarily to be truth-based or evidence-based. So what does improvement mean in that case? Improvement may mean, hey, does it allow myself to control society better? If so, that's improvement. I want to tell that story, but it's not necessarily one that's based on truth. It's one that's based on power mongering. So I'm suggesting that in those two scenarios, you're going to get a better society, better evolution in scenario 1 than you would in scenario 2. And I'm not just picking on religion, by the way. Capitalism is exactly the same scenario. If you believe capitalism and put it into scenario 2, and you believe this axiom that, oh, growth is good, permanent growth is always the best thing, wherever, you're going to reach, as we've shown in society, that there are debilitating conditions to a large number of humans. So simple religious belief in these simple thinking, okay, leads to these quote unquote unintended consequences because, we just start from very simple beginnings. And that's the problem. If you focus on simple, as in simple stories, simple themes, simple behavior, that's not the way a society can scale, as we've seen. Over.
Let me put on my super logical pattern recognition hat right now. Scenario number 1, I call that logical thinkers, scientific thinker, whatever you want to call that. It's very logical. I'm sorry to tell you that you don't have a story. It's a fact. 1 + 2 is equal to 3. It's a fact. It's not a story. You don't call that 1 + 2 equal to 3 it's a story. And then scenario number 2 is a distorted hidden agenda version of the facts. 1 + 2 equal to, you owe me $3 now instead of I owe you $3. Okay, it's a distorted facts. It's not a story. So when you use the story, you're masking the facts. The question is between the facts and what you actually resulting with what you come out from your mouth is whatever that you want to create it is you distorting the facts. As simple as that.
The same issue arises in technology. When they invented Freon, which gave us air conditioning, that was a wonderful thing, except that nobody knew that the Freon was going to end up in the upper atmosphere and destroy the ozone layer. It took them like 50 years to figure out that the Freon in the air conditioner, wonderful, great thing, Freon, suddenly has a downside that was building up incrementally year by year. Same thing, James Watt invents the steam engine. Now we have a powerful engine. It can generate electricity with a dynamo, but it's burning coal. And coal, when you burn it, puts carbon dioxide into the air. And gradually the carbon dioxide is rising incrementally little by little, and it's acting as a blanket and heating up the earth, retaining the heat. Everything that we try at the beginning looks wonderful. Nuclear power, wonderful. Then we have 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl and Fukuyama and other issues of what are you going to do with the waste products. Everything starts off with this wonderful idea that has a small but building up downside. And the same is true of stories. Stories are wonderful at the beginning, but after a while they run out of steam. They become anachronistic. But it's not just stories that become anachronistic. Science becomes anachronistic. Newton's model of gravity was wonderful, except it's slightly wrong. And where it mattered. At some point, if you want to do GPS, you can't use Newton's mathematics. You got to use Einstein's mathematics if you want your GPS to tell you where the hell you are within 10 feet.
So Barry, I think there's, at least in my mind, no disagreement with what you just said. However, in scenario 1, this constant evolution, this improvement of story or improvement of thinking is built into the way of thinking. In scenario 2, I don't see it that way. There's a very rigid, dogmatic, control-based, autocratic version of what must be believed and the stories that must be told. There is the fundamental difference. And if I turn GPT loose on 1, I think, there will be an understandable pattern of improvement of thinking. If I turn GPT loose on scenario 2, it's going to quickly discover hypocrisies and inconsistencies and contradictions. That is my claim. Over.
Let me give you a different perspective. When I tell a lie to you, I have second set of truth. Okay.
That's right. Absolutely.
The second set of truth, if I need to maintain it to continue to lie to you continuously, it's very consuming. It's run out of steam very quickly, and it will break.
You need more room in your head.
That need more room in my head, so it doesn't. So I always appreciate when people tell me lie. I say you must have overcapacity. You have enough bandwidth to do that. I say when you're tired, you can let go of the second set of truth because you don't need it. So when you say the scenario number 2, as far as I'm concerned, is equivalent to second set of truth, which is come back to this. You are telling a lie from the facts. So as I say, it's the facts, and then you just add some layer to this. Sort of like, I want you to eat rock, but I want to paint it like put some candy around it, chocolate around it, so that you bite on it and break your teeth. You know, it's like, and as long as you understand that there's a rock inside the chocolate, you know, then you know there's a second set of truth. Then why bother? Why are you wasting time talking about the yummy chocolate that you were just given? It's like, you know, you're gonna break your teeth. So I'm just saying, don't waste your time on that. Just make a story that facts that educate people about it and make people aware of it. That's what critical thinking is all about, to remove all the sugar-coated facts.
The bamboozlement.
I think that's
That's what I'm
brilliant,
trying to
Sam.
do,
I'm just-
Sam.
I was just going to add their parable about stone soup. So tell the story of stone soup, not the story of chocolate rocks. I'm going to use that. Thank you, Sam Chan.
Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, you look at people's beliefs, and beliefs can be theological. And they can also be secular beliefs. And whether it's a theological belief or a secular belief or a mathematical belief, there's a good chance that it's an error. It's a falsehood. And so the notion that Newton's model of gravity gives you a clock, false belief, okay? The notion, and this is a secular notion that's 6,000 years old, that if you want an orderly system, govern it by rules, so-called rules-based order. Most people today embrace and believe in the axiom that rule-based systems are inherently orderly, stable, and predictable. It's a falsehood. It's a falsehood that was overthrown dramatically in the 20th century with the advent of chaos theory. But most people don't realize that rule-based systems define games that are not orderly, stable, and predictable. They're mathematically chaotic. And damn it, try to explain that to anybody. I don't care if you do the math, they don't get the math. I don't care if you do the story, they don't get the story. The very first story that says, don't go by rules, you're going to start killing yourself, that story is in the 2nd chapter of Genesis. And most people who've read that story don't get what the story says.
So it's not an effective story, though.
It didn't work. And by the way, according to the people who study where these stories come from, Daniel Quinn believes that the Genesis story was written by the hunter-gatherers who essentially went extinct with the advent of the agrarian culture in Mesopotamia, in the Fertile Crescent. The agrarian culture overthrew the hunter-gatherer culture. And Daniel Quinn believes that the Garden of Eden story was written by the losers, was written by the hunter-gatherers. And the whole point of the story was it was supposed to dissuade the parents of the agrarian culture from adopting the rule of law. It's a prediction. It's a prediction. It says, you adopt the rule of law, you're going to start killing yourselves. Well, it wasn't really a prediction because the Code of Hammurabi had already been around for a couple thousand years when that story was handed down. And so it wasn't prediction, it was a post-diction. And look at, in the 20th century, 2 million people died of unnatural causes, died violently because of the rule of law. State-sponsored violence under the color of law was responsible for 200 million early deaths in the 20th century, 2 million a year. Here we go in the 21st century, that number is now down to about 1.5 million a year of unnatural deaths because of state-sponsored violence under the color of law. That prediction was written down 3,500 years ago in the 2nd chapter of Genesis. It was a good prediction. But people don't know what it means. They don't get it. They read it. They have no idea what it says.
Gosh.
I've just been thinking a lot because Barry often mentions the Code of Hammurabi and how all laws end up corrupting themselves. I'm curious, Barry, is there another system that you could think of a rule of, say, motion or a rule of movement where if it's not working, you're able to leave that situation and start another situation? Is there some sort of mathematical, logistical, if that, then this, that could work without having a rule of law?
Yes, there is a 5-stage progression that I lay out that supersedes the rule of law. The next step, the next incremental step of the rules is protocols. Protocols like a flexible rule where you do a negotiation and you arrive at the highest level of agreement that's above some floor, which is the rule. And then the next thing about protocols is to get your protocols really good, you want to build them around mathematical functions. What function? The function as the solution to the system model that governs the dynamics of the system you're trying to regulate. So if you know how a car operates on a highway and you want to build a cruise control, the cruise control has to solve the system model for the motion of a vehicle on the road and then do the optimal thing. It's the function inverse of the system model. So if you have a really good system model, if you want to do navigation in the solar system where you're going to be near Mercury and the sun, because they have them, you have to use Einstein's model of gravitational mechanics in order to steer a vehicle that can skirt the sun and not crash into it. So you can design a control system that's optimized for the system where the system model has to be precise enough to do the job. So then you go to functions. So you have rules, protocols, functions, next step up. The next step up after functions is models, because models are built out of functions. And so if you have a bunch of models, then you have an ecology of systems. A system is an ecology of models. You have all these different models that are coexisting and they interact with each other, sometimes subtly, sometimes profoundly. So you go rules, protocols, functions, models, systems, 5 stages up. And the internet starts with protocols, models, functions, and the internet is a system where these computers, the non-living components, don't beat the shit out of each other. Humans do, but the machines don't. Address resolution protocol on Ethernet. Initially, a machine said, here's my serial number of my device, and I need an IP address that's unique. Let me get an IP address. Then another one over here says, oh, but wait a minute, I'm already reserved that IP address, and that's called an ARP war. And the early days of Ethernet, they had these ARP wars, address resolution protocols, where they had 2 or more devices trying to use the same IP address, and they solved it. They got a protocol, an improved protocol that meant that when two units tried to get the same IP address, they quickly resolved it by some kind of a roll the dice and back off a certain amount of time. And collision detection and collision avoidance, all that stuff was devised using protocols where one of the tricks was to roll the dice to see who gets to go first. It's fair. This is a, well, I'm the boss, I get to go first. Oh, I'm the boss. No, just roll the dice, and whoever gets the lower number goes first. Next time it might be the other guy. These are ingenious ideas, but they weren't rule-based, they weren't solid. And the people who invented the internet did this, what, 60, 70 years ago? They thought their way through rules, protocols, functions, models, systems. Why can't Homo schleppians learn to imitate that ingenious concept of a well-regulated system? Why not? Are we that dumb? Yeah, evidently.
I think that, I mean, that's a really great question, and I've thought about that a lot. And I think it has a lot to do with how you perceive the system of life that you're living in. Meaning, does Barry have the value where I'm going to roll the dice and let chance decide if him and I get to go to the same place at the same time? In other words, it has to do with seeing your fellow human being with the same, it's in every religion. treat thy neighbor as thyself. So if you apply that, things seem to work pretty well, where you have just as much a chance to get to the same place as I do if we roll the dice. But if I say, nope, I'm not giving you that chance, like in Sam Han's story, I am not giving you that $5 and taking a chance on what you'll do or if you'll bug me every day. I'm just not going to give it to you. If you make the decision to not let chance happen, then it's power over. And that's why our systems are so fucked up. Because there's some people that will not roll the dice.
Give me another example. I want to work at Bell Labs. Bell Labs was on a property that there were 3 roads around the property. And on each of the 3 sides, there was an entrance road into the property. And because the cars were coming this way, there was a Y where they joined. And the rule was alternate feed, be a zipper. This car comes in, that car comes from the other direction, and you alternate like a zipper. And there's a little sign, alternate feed. That's all it took. And everybody at Bell Labs learned to use this protocol. And so you didn't have collisions and people sitting at this Y junction. Now, I lived in a culture where you had people like the people at Bell Labs who could figure out a mathematical solution that was optimal and easy to implement. And then we go to the general public and the government. I go, what the fuck is wrong with these people? Why can't they think? Why can't they solve problems in an obvious way? The answer is, I don't know, but they can't.
I just think it's power over versus power with, and I'll just leave it at that.
It's wisdom and intelligence combined. And it wasn't about power. It was about a functional system that was balanced and fair and functional. They found the right function every time. And I was part of that process of finding cases where the wrong function had been adopted early on and was not working. And I said, this regulatory mechanism is obsolescent and dysfunctional. Let me replace it by a functional one. And that's how I earned my living for 20 years, throwing away dysfunctional regulatory mechanisms and devising functional ones that did the job. But why did they have to send me to Stanford for 4 years to learn how to do that? Well, evidently, mathematical reasoning just isn't natural in our population. You got to spend 30 years of your life learning how to think. Okay. You know, the ratepayers of the Bell system paid enough money that Bell Laboratories sent me to Stanford for 4 years to get degrees in systems thinking. And then I went back and applied it to make the telephone network work. And I lament that I'm that unique. I don't want to be that unique. I want everybody to have that faculty, or at least more like 25% of the population. It's not good to have one person know how to figure things out and nobody else. It's a terrible idea.
Thank you, Barry. If I can steer this discussion to a different direction, if I may, because we are so wise and we love to steer people in the right direction. Let's pick a social topic today that's controversial and people doesn't know how to solve, and then put through our system and see how far we can go. Any topic at all.
There's one in the headlines every day.
Which
In Israel, what's happening in Washington, what's happening in Niger. You know, there are over every day, there's these same things where humans basically can't figure out how to function in a way that's not violent and not dysfunctional and not disruptive. You know, what's on trial in Washington isn't Donald Trump. What's on trial is the rule of law itself is on trial. And the same is true in Israel, the same is true in Niger, with the Wagner Group gradually gaining power in all these Central African countries. I mean, look, it's every day in the headlines.
So maybe put through our process of protocol and all that stuff, all the way to the structure and all that. How do we put together a public statement or open letters or whatever you want to call that to the world so that people can benefit from the way our thinking is? Maybe we can come up with a story, maybe we can tell fairy tales, whatever that is.
Yeah. And Anne-Marie and I have been pondering that, just the two of us.
Right.
For, well, technically for several years, but more intensely quite recently, because we're reviewing, okay, so you had the scriptures which tried to introduce it with theology. Then you had classical literature the Homerian and the Greek literature, and then you had the operas, and then you had Dostoevsky with Crime and Punishment, and Brothers Karamazov, and then you had Rene Girard, and you had and J.K. You can go all through history, fairy tales and fables and allegories and novels and movies and theologies and sociologies and psychologies, and you go, how come none of it's working? And what can we come up with that hasn't been tried? And I said, the last thing that came up with was the physical internet. Physical internet is an instantiation of a protocol-based system. Everybody's using it. And Marshall McLuhan says the medium is the message. It's not that you and I are talking, it's the fact that we're talking through a medium that's functional. It's called the internet protocol system. How come we can't learn the message of the medium? And the answer is, I don't know, but we're not learning it. Go ahead, Joshua.
I just don't think it's taught very well. I think when the internet was adopted, everyone learned www, they didn't learn HTTP. I just noticed that when the messaging came to the media, you can go back to, I think it's 1994, around 94, after Al Gore's little talk, and the news media picked up, there's this new thing called the World Wide Web. They didn't say there's this new thing called hypertext transfer protocol that was invented at CERN. And it was that perturbation that allowed for people not to understand the medium itself. And of course, it went further into the war that was going on at that time between Apple and Microsoft, DOS versus other operating systems, so on and so forth.
GUIs.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I've been waiting patiently for almost 30 years for everyone to start going, oh, how does this work? And we've never even had a time to stop and say that. I mean, there's the few people that make it to Silicon Valley make it because they actually ask that question, and then they start their own project, and it turns into sometimes a successful company, so on and so forth. But the few people that are doing that are running the world right now. They're become billionaires. And
by the way,
the rest of us are.
Most of the male engineers in Silicon Valley who are married to non-technical wives, their marriages fail. There's this whole phenomenon called the Silicon Syndrome, where typically the male is the one who's the techie and the female is the non-techie, and they live in, one is from Mars and one is from Venus. They're completely different cultures, and they can't figure out how to have a common culture. And there's a book, I have a book called The Silicon Syndrome, which is all about a marriage counselor in Silicon Valley who sees this pattern over and over and over again, where the nerd can't learn to live with his non-nerdy wife.
Yeah, I think Sam just said it pretty clearly. Exactly what I just said is that's what's going on.
Yeah, people want to drive a car. When you got a car in 1920, you had to be a mechanic. If you weren't a mechanic, you couldn't drive a car. But now cars, you don't have to know how they work. They make them idiot-proof. They took away the gauges and put idiot lights in. Now they're taking away, now you have automatic braking systems and automatic cruise control, and pretty soon automatic steering. So they're taking away the how to do long division. You don't know how to do long division. And you don't need to know how to do long division. The machine does it for you, and you don't even know that there is such a thing happening.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I just bought a. Oh, sorry, Barry. Go ahead.
Dean Kamen up in New Hampshire invents the Segway. Okay, this is a machine that can balance upright. If you lean forward, it goes forward. If you lean backward, it goes backward. It solves the inverted pendulum, famous inverted pendulum problem, which is a problem in first-year calculus. He makes a machine that can say, oh, I'm falling this way, I got to move the base underneath it. And he computes exactly how to do that. And he invents the Segway, and people buy the Segway. And George Bush Jr. gets on the Segway and he doesn't turn it on and it falls over. Famous experiment where he doesn't realize you got to turn on the brains, the computer. And your toddler can stand up on two legs and walk and solve the inverted pendulum problem. and your toddler hasn't learned calculus and couldn't articulate the solution to the inverted pendulum problem, but has a brain that 1-year-old wired up the solution to the inverted pendulum problem. And most adults who can stand up without falling over, if you say, how did you do that? Vertical columns fall over. How did you do that? They couldn't tell you. They don't know how it works. Their brain does it. They don't know how that happens.
Yeah.
Now, maybe if you're an athlete, you learn a little bit about how the body does the science of backflips and whatnot. But I suspect that even if you go to an Olympic athlete, not their coach, the athlete, and you say, how did you jump off of a high bar and do a flip in empty space? And most of the people would say, well, I don't know, I just learned to do it. They can't explain that the fact that you can move your limbs and bend your body at the waist are crucial aspects of being able to change your attitude in space while you're in free fall. How is it you can get spin when you didn't have spin to start with? The answer is because you can do that. But you got to do the math. Your brain has to do the math. Ask me, how does your brain do the math? I don't know. I just learned to do it.
You just made me think, if you could connect all the TikTok videos in this protocol that you're talking about with protocols, functions, models, if you could make it so that after a TikTok video happens, you can press a button that goes down a pathway of further learning of how, why, what, meaning that's what I'm watching these algorithms on YouTube and other mediums such as video streaming services, and how the protocol of the next few choices that come up after the video ends is a really big catalyst to how our societies are going to learn. Meaning, you often hear in the news, in China, there's one type of TikTok that will promote these type of learnings. And in America, there's another type of TikTok, and the control mechanism for any application I've ever built on the internet or in any software is the next choice, the choose your own storybook. And the control of the next choice is the algorithms, is the AI. That's been going on for 10 years now, is the minute you're done engaging, that next choice that comes up on the screen, whether you scroll up or whether it appears, how you choose the next perturbation is controlling society right now. And I think that's really important that we decide what choices we have until there's only, at this point, I think the average in my marketing, there's two, you have A, B, you have two choices on any button. There's very rare, sometimes there's three, but in any menu system, it usually starts, you get three. And the ones that are more than that are unsuccessful because people don't want to, just like going into a supermarket, you have 30 barbecue sauces, you're not going to sell that many. You need to have three.
Yeah, they want to keep you in the store. So after you get a bottle of barbecue sauce, then there's the mustard right next door. Oh, I need the mustard too. Well, then there's the relish. Oh, I need the relish too. Oh, there's the buns. So, and there's the seasoning. So basically what they're doing is they're trying to keep you stringing along so they can keep selling you more and more products because they keep your eyeballs glued, and they've optimized persistence of attention. That's what they've maximized. So the next thing that you're going to want to watch is something that's similar and related, but missing from the last segment. And there will, if you could do that on Facebook or TikTok or whatever, then why can't we do it with general education?
And I think what you just said is the success of Trader Joe's. When they first started, it was very eclectic. It was like a warehouse. They weren't having the shelf space that your average Kroger's or Stop and Shop or Vaughn's or whatever. They had stuff just put there because they were getting so much eclectic, weird sauces.
Right.
And that's what made it such a weird, strange new model of shopping and the success of Trader Joe's.
Stop and Shop keeps rearranging what's next to what. So I go in and I know where a product is, or I know where the mayonnaise is. And I go to get the mayonnaise and I'm like, wait a minute, the mayonnaise ain't there no more. I want to buy powdered iced tea because it's summertime. Now I know where the coffee and tea is, and I know where the bottled iced tea is, but where's the powdered iced tea? It's in a different place. And I go, they keep moving stuff. I want to buy a bottle of pickles. Where did they move the damn pickles to? They keep moving things around because they want you to buy the thing right next to it. And the result is I can't find anything anymore. They keep moving. They keep.
So I was going to say to go back to Sam Chan's original question is how do we use these systems to allow for a better functioning system overall, whether it be we still are yet to pick one specific thing in the news.
Well, I think it's
one specific.
I think it's Trump and the rule of law. I think it's Netanyahu and the Supreme Court in Israel. I think it's the Wagner Group in Niger. It's these huge, dramatic political conflicts, which are biblical class conflicts. These are biblical class conflicts.
It may be good to pick that topic, but from my perspective, they are too far, too big, I can't do anything about it arena. So I'd rather pick a topic that I can benefit today. I can learn from it. For example, I'm just going to give you an example, long division. It's not that we don't learn long division. Because all you need to do is learn the short division and you repeat the same process consistently with discipline. And though the long division is a piece of cake. So the question is, it's not about, I don't want to give you a long division. I said, let me make sure that you can practice your short division accurately for about 1,000 times. And once you do this 1,000 times, then the long division will come easy to you, though you don't have to think about it anymore like that. So from my perspective, is that how can we chunk it down so that you can benefit from today? You see a smiling face on your grandma's face because you're so proud, she's so proud of you or something along that line, that this humbly happened, it affect me right away. I have a benefit to do it because I have a compelling reason that I can gain something out of it right away. Instead of Trump's issue and Netanyahu's like, who cares? I can jump down from that 100th story and die. It wouldn't affect him anyway. So it's like, who cares? It doesn't matter.
Same is true of handwriting. 70 years ago, you taught handwriting. Now they don't teach handwriting anymore. Before you had typewriters, you had to write everything down. Then we got typewriters and now we got computer keyboards and you speech to text. So you can say to your cell phone, memo, I need to buy mayonnaise. So they don't teach handwriting anymore.
Okay.
And the result is that when I write down a note, I can't read my own handwriting.
Because you're a doctor. It's the doctor's handwriting you can read, right?
Same deal. I look at something that's handwritten, even if I wrote it yesterday, I still can't figure out what I wrote.
So what is one thing for four of us that, that would be, we deal with it every day, that we love, every time it's almost like a pet peeve, right? Every time I come to that, it's like, I wish I can solve that. What kind of protocol would be useful for that? Something along that line.
How about these notifications that come and go ding dong, ding dong, ding dong?
Hey, Joshua.
Here's a protocol that I came up with a while back, and I'd like to implement it again, is take a large thing that's too complex for one person and break it into a group. So when I was first learning the internet, I had a book from Microsoft. It was the protocol for Front Page was the name of the software. And the book I got from Borders was 1,200 pages long. And I knew I could never learn it. So I got 4 of the smartest people I knew that were interested in computer science. And we broke it into chapters and we divvied off the chapters for what each people had aptitude for. So one guy was very good at PHP and CGI. And so we gave him those chapters. Another guy was really good at CSS and designing. He was using Photoshop and design. We gave him those chapters. And then as a collective group, we came back together the next week and said, what did you learn from chapter 16 and 17? And it's, much like how you do school, where the teacher goes through the chapters. But by divvying off a large, complicated thing into smaller sections and then allowing for each person to communicate back to the group, that skill process, I think, was invaluable. And I don't see that happening in Discord channels or it used to be a sort of common thing on the internet that we used to tackle learning together. And I don't even see us doing that here at the GCC. I would love to do something like that would help us to understand these, like take an issue like what's going on in Niger. If you could find some sort of documentary or book and say, hey, you watch the first 20 minutes, Stam Chan, you watch the last 20 minutes, come back, we could digest that information a lot faster than we could on our own, especially if we pulled in an expert to talk to us about Niger, someone who's from Niger and lived there. Wow, what a half an hour into the next GCC, we could really have tackled that conflict quickly. I don't know do you guys have protocols in doing that type of group learning?
Well, Sam Chan and I did an exercise, taking my academic writing and giving it to GPT and say, write this for a third grader, or write it as a fairy tale, or write it as a poem. Anne Marie and I are trying to figure out how to explain why the rule of law is failing to a public audience. And we haven't figured out a better way than everybody's tried and failed for 6,000 years. So yeah, I've got little, onesies and twosies of people who are collaborating, putting our heads together. Sam and I try to figure out how to get the Sprout to work. We didn't, okay, but you work at this fix-it shop. If I get stuck, there's two other guys on that same day, and we put our heads together to try to figure things out. But they tend to be onesies and twosies, because as soon as the team gets to be 3, 4, 5, 6 people, you're always missing a team member on a session. So yeah, I tend to, most composers were the music and lyrics. It was, you name them, these famous composer lyricist teams. They were usually 2 people. One wrote the lyrics, the poetry, one wrote the music, and then somebody else performed it.
Yeah, I did notice, I'm just sharing an anecdote. My cousin, who was a lot younger than me, about 20 years younger, he, it was in the early 2000s when he had a question he couldn't answer. He just went to his group chat on whatever, if it was Twitter or he was using. And because of his reach, because he grew up in a protocol where everyone groupthinked, right, he could get an answer within about 5 to 10 minutes, which would have taken me maybe 2 to 3 days to ask my network.
RFP, RFC back in the days of Usenet, request for comments, request for proposal. And typically within a day or two, somebody would come up with an idea that you hadn't thought of that had promise. And then people would comment on it saying, this is how it will work. This is how it's going to run into obstacles. This is what you got to look out for. This is your downside. And you could, that was a wonderful RFC, RFP era back when all it was just Usenet.
Yeah, that's the thing that I try to introduce you to, the heartbeat, where you have a asynchronized, audio to auditory or video as well as text, asynchronized platform where everybody can contribute and it doesn't need to be present at that time, so that synchronized gathering is not possible. So asynchronized platform is really important. That's why it's like, that's what I'm trying to build, because unless, where it's convenient for me is in a format like Barry was talking about. If I speak too fast, you won't catch it all the way. With the text, I can handle a lot better. So how could I improve the usability? How can I improve the comprehensions? I can improve the ease of use and convenient time, all that. Once you have the platform, then the collaboration can happen.
Yeah. I think that Zoom is not a good medium for cooperation.
Yep.
It's oral communication. It's real time. You got to be present with the camera on. And compared to store and forward text, where the consistent chat, you can go back and read the chat, that I always thought worked a whole lot better than trying to collaborate in a live Zoom session. I think it's not a very efficient medium unless you're rehearsing a drama sketch or something. Maybe okay for rehearsal, but not for brainstorming. The window of remembrance,
and I also
what somebody
think
said 5 minutes ago, forget it. I can't remember what somebody said 5 minutes ago.
Yeah. And onboarding and maintaining the onboarding, meaning just filling out a form. I remember Doug Breitbart made a form on his Values Foundation that it was a long list of protocols of how you want to be contacted, but upkeeping that week by week or month by month in some sort of timely fashion, because people's lives change. That is, I think, what's needed is there's just too many forms of communication So it's hard to keep everyone on the same type of platforms. It's difficult.
Exactly. Just in the local chapter of Toastmasters, some people are using email. One person is using Apple Messenger. Another person is using Facebook Messenger. Other persons are making phone calls. And every little subset, I've got a different physical channel to communicate with them. And so I'm acting like a go-between. So I talk to this person on Facebook Messenger and that person on an email and this person on Apple Message, whatever it's called, FaceTime, whatever the hell. And it's nuts because we're all out of sync with each other. And then in the meeting, when you have a 1 hour meeting once a week, then you have people talking in the meeting. So that's like 5 different media. And, you know, Marshall McLuhan says the medium is the message. And you know, we're trying to do hybrid meetings because half the people are remote and half of them are coming in person. And when they invented Toastmasters in 1903, Ralph Smedley said, you have these wayward adolescents, males in Bloomington, Illinois. Let's have them come to the YMCA and learn to talk face to face, eyeball to eyeball, a handful of them in a little room. So he invents this educational model of how do you talk to people face to face, eyeball to eyeball when you're 19 years old and practically a juvenile delinquent. That becomes Toastmasters. Except that today you've got adults who are college educated, not wayward adolescents. And half of them are not even present in the same city, they're remote. And some are in the room in the community center. And you're trying to use hybrid meetings where it's not just acoustic face-to-face, eyeball to eyeball. You got Zoom and room cameras trying to cover the room for the people at home. And you're trying to do a conference microphone speaker system that can pick up everybody's speech, which is terrible. And I'm going, Marshall McLuhan, what the hell? It's not how to say 3 sentences that somebody can understand face to face. It's how do you communicate with multiple media? You got television, you got audio, you got telephony, you got text, you got all these media. And my God, we're not communicating. We're not learning to use the media. Go ahead, Joshua.
I think Sam Han just put into the chat an agreement for shared memory. And I would just add to that a transparent public agreement for shared public memory. Is that something that we could try to accomplish?
And access to it. How can I access even my own memory, which is fading, and I have to go back to where did I write that down, 7 years ago, because I can't remember the details. I mean, even my own memory is a lot of work to pull it back up again.
Sam Han, do you have some ideas of ways to implement that protocol?
As more and more gets automated, I think it's more and more likely to do it. I have no disagreement with it other than that it just takes somebody to spend time doing it. And right now, it's barely all I can do to even get the videos up onto YouTube. I used to create transcripts and documents that noted, who was there and, what the notes were, etc. I haven't been doing that for over a year because I haven't had the time. So in theory, I don't have any objection. I just think that, whoever does want to do this has to spend some time doing it, or now soon we may have RPA or other bots that can do it for me. I just haven't taught them how to do that yet. So
yeah,
it's mostly just logistical and time cost.
It's not a new idea.
And would the memory, would the memory be in an accessible place from anyone outside of this group?
We could choose to do it
Is
that
that
way.
an
Sure.
agreement we could make?
We
Yeah.
could make that.
I
We
would
haven't done that yet
prefer-
because right now we have a cost to pay to Google, and I've been paying that cost. I haven't asked for any help for that cost, but there hasn't been a way for us to, say, share or institutionalize that cost. So not a big deal for me, but that's one of the things that we would have to take care of.
I mean, we have public libraries, we have video libraries. We have internet searches. You go all the way back to religion. first they write down these 5 books of Moses called the Torah. Then you have the prophets, and then the writings, and then the Mishnah, which is the conversation about it. And the rabbis down through the ages wrote down their commentaries and their discussions and their interpretations. And you have this huge library of literature that starts with the Torah and goes down until, I don't know, the middle, around 1200 or 1500, the Kabbalah. The same thing. People were figuring out how to keep a record of everything that people have talked about and organized. And you can see it. You can see this example in the Jewish writings down through the ages, all the way to modern times. Now you can find the sermons posted online, the videos of the sermons posted online. There it is. I mean, people have found ways to record things and make them publicly available. But do people go back and look at a sermon that somebody gave, a century ago or last week?
Well, the protocol that I would propose, if there is an agreement made, there needs to be a transaction for an agreement, whether it be a teeny tiny one, but something that cements that agreement with a transaction. That's the way I understand how PayPal was created, is you put 17 cents into your bank account and you create that agreement, and then now you can use the service. So in other words, if the agreement has no transaction, it's hard to keep track of those agreements, especially if they don't have a unique identifier.
Then how do you enforce the agreement?
Even if it's a small.
I mean, the problem is
But I'm saying but I'm saying it's enforced with a transaction, even if it's a small amount.
So
like
you
a
lose your
dollar.
17, you lose your 17 cents if you renege.
It's not about losing it, you're giving it. So you're saying, I'm going to give 17 cents to cement the agreement. And if someone says, did you agree to publicly sharing your knowledge? They say, no, I never agreed to that. Well, the 17 cents says you did.
Yeah. All right. But now what do you do about it? Because now they're withholding their writings.
I'm sorry?
So the person says, okay, every time I write a blog post, I'm going to publish it so anybody can read it. And then they still writing stuff, but they're not publishing it. You go, how come you haven't
No, I'm
published it
saying-
for the last 6 months? You said you were going to publish
But I'm
everything
saying
you wrote.
We've all agreed to press record. So that's been agreed upon. So I'm saying in this essence, pressing record is the publishing, the beginning protocol of the publishing. Then that recording itself, we have yet to agree on where it gets broadcast out. From what I understand,
how long did Doug Breitbart fall behind of uploading? He fell behind like 3, 4, 5, 6 months of not uploading the recordings. Sam, you probably remember this better than I do. He got way, way behind in uploading.
Right. So the publishing protocol is the next step, but just agreeing to press record was the first. I'm saying if we could create, like Sam Chan asked, using your method, protocols, agreements, if we could make that work functionally, and then to keep the arguments away where someone says, I did not agree to that, if there's a public record of a knowledge repository with that public statement, whether it be on a blockchain, etc., that would take away any arguments about whether you agreed or not. And then if you don't want to do it anymore, you just don't come, or you don't use the application.
It's easy to prove that people don't keep their word. That's commonplace, and it's not hard to prove they didn't keep their word.
But I'm saying,
Broken promises are very commonplace.
right. But
Judaism,
instead of getting into the weeds of that, I'm saying we all agreed to press. It's being recorded right now. My voice right now is being recorded. So I can't say I didn't agree to my voice being recorded. It doesn't change the fact that it's being recorded.
good luck finding it.
Well, I know exactly where Sam puts it.
Yeah, provided you
told
can
me.
recall where Sam puts it, and it's still there. On
Well, that's
on the eve of Yom Kippur, they open the Yom Kippur service with a prayer called Kol Nidre. Kol Nidre means all vows, and the Kol Nidre prayer is, dear God, let it make that all of the vows, all the promises we made, as if they never were made. The whole point of the Kol Nidre service is we kept making all these promises. Let's just agree that forget about it. These promises never happened. they're not valid. That's the beginning of Kol Nidre for the Yom Kippur services, Friday night. Why did they
Do you
make
know
that
why
so-
this is so important? Do you know why this is so important?
Because people can't keep their promises.
No,
No, you don't think so?
no, I don't think so.
What do you think?
You have to start from focus on the power of now. If you have to carry all the history behind you, you're doomed.
Correct.
Thank you. Think of all the baggage you have to carry with you. How could you create a future with the maximum effectiveness, maximum clarity, maximum?
All that baggage. That's why they call us Homo schleppians, because of all that baggage we're schlepping.
Yeah. And that's why you have to let
That's,
go.
that's
You have to let go everything that you did, all the trophy and all the gold medals you have, and all the vow that you token and all that stuff. One of my favorite thing about marriage is about, honey, it's been so good so far. Let's see how it goes.
I mean, Trudeau just separated from his wife, the Prime Minister of Canada, just announced yesterday. he's
Yeah.
Separating.
Yeah. And you can always come back if you want to. That's why I always remind people that it can always come back. It's not that, she's dead or he's dead or whatever. So you can always come back. If you choose something else, it's not as good, right? So that's it. Again, it's the same thing as long division again. If you do that one thing well, all you do is repeat it with discipline and with clear mind, you're going to be successful in any complex, whatever theory, theorem, logic, anything.
But you can't earn a living to buy a fish if all you're doing is long division as your only skill. It's not, you can't earn a living at long division anymore.
I always remember
If you
that
want-
the first rocket was shoot up to the moon with everything was manually done with a slice rule, right? Yeah.
Yeah, there were women who did the math, and they only used Newton's laws of gravitational mechanics to go to the moon.
That's
They
right.
did not use Einstein's. They didn't need Einstein's stuff to go to the moon.
Yeah, same thing at the First World War and the Second World War as well. It's all done by.
Yeah,
all the-
ballistics was Newtonian ballistics.
Yeah.
Now, if
That's
you
right.
want to go to the sun, you got to take into account. You want to go to Mercury. Mercury's orbit isn't what Newton said it was going to be. Mercury ain't there where you thought it was.
See what I mean by long division can go very far.
Josh,
I always think about it's really easy to pull something apart. It's hard to organize it, label it, and put it back together.
absolutely. It's easier to disassemble a jigsaw puzzle than to assemble it by orders of magnitude.
Yep.
Take it apart in
That's
a minute, and it take days to put it back together again.
That's one of the greatest lessons I learned in martial arts is if you are going to be a striking martial artist, you need to learn how to be a healing martial artist, because one of the rules that I learned is if you break someone's arm, then it's your job to stick with them until it's healed.
I want to come back to
Otherwise,
Joshua,
you don't have.
I want to come back to Joshua, what you just said. It's hard to put things back after you take it apart. The reason it's hard for you to put it back is because you don't have enough to take it apart. If you take apart 10,000 of those things, trust me, it's easy to put it back. Again, it's just changing the parameters. It's facts. It's not story. It's not excuse. Like the handing the $5 thing. Yeah, from my perspective, the hidden agenda could be that, you know what, I need an excuse why I need the $5 for my own sandwich later on, or I need to get the buzzer. So you need an excuse, okay? You want to look good or whatever that reason is. There's a lot of agenda behind the story. That's what I mean by, again, facts, sugar coated or chocolate coated, whatever that is. So if you can take apart the chocolate focus and focus on the facts, that's really the facts. Whatever the pure karma or whatever you want to call the consequences, I don't know how to name it more, but once you have a hidden agenda to cover it up, then everything is possible. It's like whatever.
Reading between the lines. If you read literary fiction, you have to learn to read between the lines,
That's right.
because they're telling a lie so that they can conceal the fact that they're really conveying the truth.
That's right.
Scam. I could never read fiction because I didn't know how to figure out the truth that they were encoding in this made up story.
That's right.
On the other hand, I could read a math expression, figure out what it says. Most people look at a math expression, it's gibberish. They don't know what it means.
And it takes a lot of learning to learn how to, it's not a thing of somebody hand you a pill, sugar coated, right? You see a pill, you know you don't want to take it apart and they try to swallow what's inside there, right? It's really, really bitter, right? It's like, okay, I'm so grateful that people put a story around it so that I can absorb it easily. If you try to tell me a story in a mathematical equation, I got fall asleep in 3 minutes.
What is this song? A little bit of sugar helps the medicine go down. You give the dog a pill, but you wrap it up in peanut butter. So the dog is eating a dollop of peanut butter, but really there's a pill in it. An anti-wormer pill or whatever you're giving the dog.
You know, my 4-year-old grandson have to take some antibiotic because of ear infection. And we're having a hard time because we have one mouthful of it, and then you gotta put some chocolate or cookies or whatever. And when we run out of chocolate and cookie, you know what I did? Look up, you won't be able to taste anything. So he looked up so he can fit it in. So that's another distraction as well. So again, it's
and that's why we tell stories. That's the sugar coating that goes around the moral of the story is at the end. You may not even bother to read it. It might be in italics in small print for the parent to read, but the child doesn't ever realize that there's a moral to the story until they're grown up. Dr. Seuss, makes up the Lorax, the spokesmodel for environmental awareness. And at what point does a kid who reads the Lorax or has it read to them realizes that's about environmental awareness? Maybe when they're in their 20s, they figure out that's what it was about. Go ahead, Joshua.
I think Sam Chan said something very powerful, which is letting go of the past, being in the present, and then moving forward. And for me, sometimes I think it's making a decision to let go, or making a decision to be happy, or making a decision to be excited. Once in the present, you make that decision, then you have a possible trajectory to go in that direction. And the only thing stopping you from moving in that direction is remembering that you're not allowed to be happy, or you're not allowed to be hopeful. It's the power. That's what I meant when I said the power over or power with. Just the decision to go with the excitement is powerful. Just to make that decision. Like there's a famous movie with Tom Cruise. I don't even want to bring in that movie, but the point being is you wake up in the morning and you clap your hands and you say, today is going to be a wonderful day. Just by doing that action changes a possible trajectory for that day. And it's a very powerful gesture. Today's going to be a wonderful day.
Shakespeare.
You can say that today is powerful, but again, that's not sugar coated. I just invite you to think of that you're going out for a trip and the way you pack your luggage. You don't say like, I've taken 20 trips. That was very, I want to pack whatever I have before, what the underwear, whatever that was I use, all that stuff. Instead, it's like, what am I going to need? What's going to make me the trip successful and all that stuff. So you focus purely from the now going forward. And the history serves as a lesson, serves as a feedback for you to see if it's useful or not. It's not allow you to drag it on, because the more you drag on, the more you go slow it down, and your luggage will have half of the luggage has useless history in it that you don't need to drag with you.
Talking about what's not allowed, Shakespeare wrote about it. Taboo or not taboo? That is the question.
Tell me more.
Yeah.
Just the point. It's a joke.
Right.
Taboo or not taboo? That is the question.
Yeah.
What's allowed?
Yeah. So the question again is about when you have a compelling reason, you have the resources, you have the technology, and going forward, what can we learn? What did we learn? What's the protocol that we have? What's the structure we have? And what's the best structure to do it? And knowing that whatever solution we have today will be a problem for tomorrow. So just be gentle about it so that our solution should not be too extreme case, because you kill the before you have the problem coming out, meaning that you won't even live to see the future problem that today's solutions to tomorrow's problem, you don't even see the problem because you're dead already or something along that line. So I'm always gentle when I design solutions, like, okay, don't go to the extreme cases because it may be too damaging. The more severe the solution you have, the more severe you're gonna face the problem. They're gonna be more extreme, if I can say that way.
Global warming, for example, or the ozone layer.
Yeah.
Somebody else's problem. By the way, Sigmund Freud wrote a book called Totem and Taboo. And his point, if you parse the title, is that somebody has the power to say you're not allowed to do that. And the person who can say you're not allowed to do it is the person at the top of the totem pole. Person with the most power, the highest ranking authority figure, basically says, you're not allowed to do that. It's taboo. Totem and taboo. There it is in Freud. And then when that guy dies and he's replaced by the next guy up, the next guy is probably going to flip it and allow that which was taboo in the previous generation to become acceptable today. And so you have this enantiodromia, this reversal of what was disallowed is now allowed and celebrated until the next generation. And it's sort of this pendulum swings, this way and that way. Every other cycle, it swings the other way again. Taliban is swinging one way, the liberals are swinging the other way. The conservatives and the liberals, what's allowed and what's not allowed, how much freedom.
Thank you. So I would say it's 10 o'clock already. So I want to leave everybody have something to think about over tomorrow until whatever that is. Think about something that is useful for you and you don't know what to do about it. And the system, the protocol, perhaps might be able to break the spell of the curse.
And by the way, that's a blog post that rules, protocols, functions, models. That's a blog post I wrote, I don't know, 7-8 years ago.
And we want to put it to good use, Barry. We would love to put it in a good use so that we solve our own problem first. And once it's useful, we can share it with the world and, and then post it in place. If we can help one person, to me, that's enough.
Yeah, I would like to start using the PP, the practice protocols. So if it works, it works. If it doesn't, but if you haven't practiced it, you never know.
Right. And we can get feedback from it and we can improve upon improvement, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, my friend, it's 10 o'clock. Time to take a break from this wonderful discussion. Otherwise, we wouldn't end it, right? That's a protocol.
Thank you, Barry.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Chat. All right, let's see if Mr. Duck GPT can stop the recording.
Mm-hmm.